All right. Velvet, thank you for coming on to South Coast Chronicles. We've been friends or known each other a long, long time since I was, I think, 22 years old, first time I met you. You guys were at the Costa Mesa Club, and we were hanging out at the Newport Club, and that's good. Well, thank you for coming on. Wanted to have you on. You're one of the pioneers in our industry and treatment. Started Safe Harbor how many years ago?
1993.
93. Wow. And it was an
December,
all-women's treatment
actually.
center. So that was probably the second treatment center in Orange County, right? There was Sober Living by the Sea, and then you.
Yeah.
Wow. So I wanted to have you on because I've heard your story before, and it's fascinating, and I wanted to share it. So just kind of start out by telling us where you grew up, what your childhood was like.
Well, I grew up in North Hollywood, actually. I was born in Glendale, raised in North Hollywood. Do you want me to just say my whole life?
Yeah, tell me about that.
Okay.
How did your parents wind up in North Hollywood?
Well, my mom, my mom was best friends with my dad's wife.
Oh,
Yeah, so
Okay.
I was kind of a little secret,
okay,
and it was not planned.
okay,
So my mom lived in North Hollywood, and he lived in another place with his family.
okay,
And so it was kind of a situation for a while.
right,
But we lived on Coldwater Canyon, grew up in North Hollywood, and, just like the 70s, it was just a cool place to live, little apartment, lived there for like 10 years.
wow.
Yeah.
And what was that like growing up with your dad
Yeah.
having another family? Did you know, or did he come around, or?
I was very confused.
Yeah.
Yeah, he came around, and I was like always kind of like hidden. We had to sneak up to his work, and it was just this weird experience. But nobody ever told me what was happening. I just
Right.
knew something was wrong.
And you had brothers and sisters from that other?
My dad had 2 sons. Yeah.
Okay. And you didn't know them, or
Oh,
they
no,
kept you away from
I
them?
didn't know them, but my dad would talk about them.
Okay.
And then eventually the wife found out, and then my dad he lost everything. She wouldn't let him see the kids, and just got real nasty. And it's funny because that's where I began to feel really like this strange guilt
Right,
and shame,
right,
and just kind of owned it as
Right.
something inherently wrong with me.
right. That feeling a lot of us have as addicts is like we don't belong and we don't
I did
fit
something
in.
terrible, and
Right.
I didn't even know it.
Right. And so you're 10 years old living in North Hollywood, and your dad got
Yeah.
exposed, and
I actually probably found out around 7 or so. But even by then, I was using drugs. Like, by the time I was 7, I was using my mom's, she called them vitamins. And my mom's an addict. She's been an addict her entire life. She would leave these things she called vitamins, and so I would take her vitamins, which were like crosstops.
right. That's a
Just-
70s, 80s thing I
Yeah.
haven't heard in a while.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they were crosstops.
Cross tops or white crosses, or yeah.
And I would eat those, and then I started to be able to, my mom would give me notes to go to the grocery store to get her cigarettes, and my cousin Dee Dee put on there one time, and beer. So we'd go up to the store with a little note, and they'd give us a case of beer, and we would just drink it in
Right.
a little, like, trash area.
Yeah.
And I was only probably maybe 9.
Right.
So, but go back a little bit. I was born addicted to drugs.
Okay.
I was born, my mom was a speed addict.
Okay.
So when I was born, I had a lot of complications in my stomach.
Right.
So I was on phenobarbital till I was 3.
Okay.
So when I got introduced again to my mom's vitamins,
Right.
it was like second nature.
Right.
It was like, oh, thank God, because
Yeah.
that's all I knew.
Right. So chemically, it just turned that back on.
really did.
That's an interesting,
And I hit it
yeah.
hard.
Right. And then so you're 7 years old taking your mom's
Cross
tops. Right. And-
Thinking they're vitamins.
right.
All I know is it makes me feel good.
Makes you feel good, feel awake, get stuff done.
Yeah, I don't know
Right.
anything else.
Right. So at 7 years old, you're using drugs.
I'm using drugs.
daily.
Pretty much daily, yeah.
Not even really knowing you're using drugs,
no,
but
I
you
was
are
using
using drugs.
Yeah, but I
Okay.
knew I was drinking,
Yeah.
and I couldn't read or write. I was born, like, I had a lot of disabilities when I was born, physical, and then I couldn't understand things that normal kids could understand. So when I went to school, they put me in special needs classes almost immediately, because I just didn't have the cognitive connection to anything. I would just
Right.
cry and throw up, and Then I ended up getting kind of like a Tourette's, where I was really anxious all the time, thought my mother was going to die all the time.
Yeah.
So I would just have this obsessive thought. So I'd throw up, and I couldn't eat lunch, and
Yeah.
it was just like there was no function. So by the time I was in the third grade, conscious, I couldn't read or write.
Right.
And that just continued, and they just kept me in the special needs classes.
Right. And so that was their answer back then for
Yeah.
kids with
Problems.
mental things is go to special needs class.
And I was in there with all the handicapped kids, which to this day I love that, because I've always been fierce for the underdog.
Right. And they're such neat kids.
They are. They
Yeah.
were my friends.
Yeah.
Roberta with no eyebrows.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah. I grew up around special needs kids because that's what my mom taught my whole life. And
Interesting.
yeah, they're such beautiful people. And I remember one time telling my mom, God, I feel kind of sorry for them. And she jumped all over my shit and said, don't you ever feel sorry for them. Most of those guys are happier than you would ever think about being.
Absolutely.
You know?
Only one award I ever got as a kid. And my friend Smiley, who didn't speak, but he smiled and he nodded his head constantly. And these football kids decided to knock his books out of his hand. And I happened to be behind him. And I was like a feral cat at this point,
Right.
like crazy kid. I grew up, and I was bused in L.A. I went to school in Pacoima, Watts. I mean, I knew how to fight.
Right.
And so they were messing with my little friend, and I ran up to them and bit the guy's tip of his ear, blood, did
There
my
you
first Donald Tyson move.
Yeah.
And I got an award for being the kindest kid at the school.
Don't you miss the 70s and the 80s? Back then when a fist fight was a fist fight at school, it's not a...
The math teacher came out.
Right.
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
I know.
Gave you an award.
Yeah.
Kindest kid in school.
Kindest kid in school.
Yeah, for biting somebody's ear off.
for
I love
messing
it.
with Smiley.
I love it. So you're going to school. At 7, you start taking drugs, not knowing you're taking drugs. You start drinking at how old? How old were you?
I was probably about 8.
Do you remember your first time?
Oh, yeah. It was great. It was so fun. It was like, well, I remember like my life was so tight and scared. Like my mom suffered with an addiction.
Right.
And her love of her life was married and had another family.
Mm-hmm.
And her kid was the hidden one living in an apartment, and they're living in, this beautiful ranch and having this magical childhood.
Mm-hmm.
So in her, she was suffering and
Right.
and addiction, and she would take downers too. So the mix and sometimes the combo would be like
Right.
very vital, like horrible. So anywho, when I would just so uncomfortable and scared and sad and anxious all the time. So when I got my hands, I didn't know beer because my mom was not a drinker, but my cousin Dee Dee knew about beer.
Right.
So my first experience.
Was Dee Dee older?
Dee Dee
or-
was 3 years older than me,
Okay.
and she had a way worse life than me.
Yeah.
So so anyway, we enjoyed that beer.
Right.
We cracked it open, and I remember walking up Coldwater Canyon, and it was like just another painful day. And then coming down, it was like, oh, thank God.
Yeah.
Like tight shoes just came off my feet. It was
Right.
like relief. And I wanted that all the time. I wanted it. And so any time I got to go, and I didn't know how to spell, so she made sure that she wrote beer for me so I could put it on the
Right.
paper, and beer. So I
Yeah.
got a little note in my pocket,
Yeah.
and beer.
Yeah. So 8 years old, you're drinking,
Drinking.
progresses.
cross stops, yeah.
Like, so what?
Now
so
now weed is like a thing, and
Yeah.
everybody's smoking weed, and it's an apartment building, so you got older kids and
Right.
just constantly
You guys are all running around
having
together.
fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I don't know if this is appropriate or not,
Go
but
ahead.
like my very first gig to make money was like, this is how my brain worked. Well, first I'm going to tell you my name's Velvet, right?
Right.
Velvet Blue is my name.
Right.
My mom was one of 11 kids. 2 of the sets of twins died. Her mother's name was Mary, and her father's name were Joseph. So Mary and Joseph had all these kids, and basically they were all raised to be criminals. Like that was the gang. Like
Yeah.
that's your gig. My grandmother was the first one to teach me how to dine and ditch.
Okay.
You know, like she taught me skills.
Yeah. You guys are like a family of gypsies or something, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we'd get together, and my uncles and cousins and their friends would all circle around me, and I was maybe 4, 5, 6, and I would dance, and they'd throw money at me. So like, I'm sure that the end result was the Velvet Blue is now going to be a famous dancer, right? Or the movie industry. So anyway, that my life was strange.
Right.
It was just
from the get, right?
It was just like that was the hope for me.
Right. So so that was so you're in this. Did any of your family live in the apartment?
So the apartment.
Okay, yeah.
So the apartment. So I decided I was maybe 6, and I was always kind of like a hustler. I liked making money.
Right.
So I would tell the boys that if they got a quarter, I'd show them a little glimpse, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, I was making so much money. And then all of a sudden, this one little stupid ass goes and tells his mother he needs a quarter.
Right.
And she asked why.
Right.
And so she told him why. And that was my first hustle. And I just loved hustling. I loved making money and just it gave me some kind of form of value, even though it was not appropriate.
Right. Right. So you're living in the apartment complex, making a quarter a show. And then what? Like, where'd it go from there?
Anywho,
what was your next hustle?
I know, my next hustle, sell all my Christmas presents the next day.
Yeah.
I always wanted to create something, whether it was good, bad, or indifferent.
Right.
And I had no skills. I wasn't good at sports. I wasn't good at, I had no academic strength. So it was like, I don't know what it was in me that felt like I can't be left behind, but I'm such a foreigner on this planet. I got to figure out how to navigate.
Yeah.
And the alcohol and the drugs helped me significantly.
Right.
Even as a little kid, it gave me courage to do these things.
Yeah. What's the first time you remember kind of getting a consequence from drinking alcohol or doing drugs?
Honestly, the consequences for me weren't that radical in the beginning, because tragedy hit my life so quickly. My dad ended up finally coming to live with us because the wife kicked him out. He lost his business. All kinds of things happened as a consequence of me, in my mind. So
you took that on like it was your fault.
And it kind of was, because if I hadn't been born, then my dad would have had more.
But as a kid, you didn't choose that.
I didn't do it, but his life would have been very different had I not shown up.
Right.
But so he lost everything. He was the first guy to invent storage units in 1961.
Oh wow.
Yeah, he owned apartment buildings in Glendale, and he had these openings for garages, and put an ad in the paper and got 150 phone calls in a weekend.
Oh wow.
And so he went out and called it Garage Emporium.
Yeah.
But he didn't buy the land. And so I think 20 years later he lost it and didn't do what Public Storage did. And he was consumed with my mother, and his wife. And so that was happening. But anyway, he lost everything. He came to live with us. I was 10. We moved from North Hollywood to San Clemente. Within 9 months, we didn't even have enough money to pay the rent. So we ended up being kind of a homeless family. I lived with my aunt. My dad lived in behind some liquor store and some closet room. And anyway, so then he became a car salesman. So he was a millionaire to a car salesman.
Okay.
And he obviously wasn't very happy.
Right.
I'm drinking and using all the time, but it's not that.
How old were you when you moved to San Clemente?
10.
Okay.
I just turned 10. And I loved San Clemente compared to North Hollywood.
Did you?
Be in the valley to the beach, it was just and San Clemente is a cool place to live. I was a pier rat, I was hanging out with all the little surfers, and it was just fun. So, and I was drinking and using shockingly with all of them, and I was a lot younger. But so he ended up, we moved to Huntington Beach, becomes a car salesman, and he dies, a massive heart attack. As soon as I get my dad back, it's
How old were you?
I was 14.
Oh, so 4, yeah.
So
wow.
I was 14. It was second day of high school. I'm still in all the special needs classes. Like I'm doing the same crossword puzzle that I've been doing since the 4th grade. Like I just
Right.
bring it each year.
Yeah.
Never did finish it.
Right.
And so, but what was interesting was I met Coach White just even in the second.
Coach White from Edison High
Edison.
School, who's the winningest football coach I think ever
Yeah.
in Orange County. He's a
Yeah.
legend.
Yeah,
So,
and
yeah.
he saved my life for real.
Coach White
Yeah,
did?
he did.
Wow.
He did. I was in his class, and something about Coach White and me just clicked. Like, I don't know what it was about him that we just like really just
That's
loved each
awesome.
other. And so it's the second day of high school. I wait for my dad. He never comes to pick me up. He's supposed to be there at 3:30. Doesn't come. I go home. I wait. Nobody's home. I don't know what's going on. Anyway, he died of a massive heart attack. He dropped me off at school and then went down to jog and died. And he was only 53. He's my age now.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, so then my mom tried to kill herself like 3 days later. So she was in a mental institution. We had no money to pay anything. We didn't have anything.
Right.
It was just month to month based on my dad's money he made. And so she was in a mental institution, and I was living in the 1970 Buick that my dad's car lot had given my mom because he had a car that, you know, they loaner cars, so we
Right.
didn't even have a car. So that was the beginning, and I was 14, and it was just game on at that point. So I would say that was the consequence, because all fun was just dissolved. There was no fun now. There was just pure have to get as high as I can because
Right.
I am shocked, and there's no way. I mean, I'm illiterate. I'm completely worthless.
Right.
I have no mom and dad.
Yeah.
I mean, even their high hopes of me becoming a stripper wasn't going to work out because I
Right.
didn't think I was that pretty, you know?
Right.
So, like, I'm screwed and,
Yeah.
you know, doing shitty things that little girls do when they're desperate to get alcohol and drugs and comfort. And that just was, you know, by the time I made it to Alcoholics Anonymous, I was like wild.
Yeah.
Like PTSD wild, like just emotionally
Sure.
shot out, distraught.
So you're 14, you're going to Edison High School. Tell me about Coach White saving your life. I want to hear
Yes.
that story.
I love Coach White. So I go in and out of class, right? So I'm not really going to class, but I go in and out of class because it's something that reminds me, right? So Coach White and I become super close. Like he sees me and he knows that I'm now an orphan, you know, and he's like, so he's watching out for me like a coach does.
Right.
I disappear. I don't come for like 4 or 5 months. Like I don't come, and then I show up one day, and when I showed up, I was probably at least like I was like under 100 pounds, and I had been the night before. I had decided that I had to end my life. Like I was like, there's no way. Like I can't survive here. It's just too much. So. My great aunt had told me that if I wrote to God, he could hear my prayers clearer sometimes. And so I wrote to God. I was parked in the parking lot of the Edison, and I wrote to God, and I just said, I can't do this, God. I don't want to go to hell. And there was no such thing as, in my mind, of AA or anything. It had never,
Yeah.
no one ever mentioned anything like that. So
Yeah.
I'm thinking, you live miserably or you have to kill yourself. Those are my choices. I didn't think, oh, surrender to, you know, blah. It was just, God, please don't make me go to hell. Let me come home to my dad. Like, please just let me. And so I wrote to God, and then and I had a bottle of Valium, and I had Captain Morgan's, and I had the plan. And in my mind, it was one more thought was just say goodbye to Coach White.
Right.
So I passed out. I woke up. I went to his class. He always closed the door and locked it past a certain time. So I knocked on his door.
Yeah.
He opened it, and he sees me, and like all the color in his face just disappears. Like,
Yeah.
and in his mind, he says all he could think was, "She's gonna die. She's gonna die. She's gonna die." And like in his mind and in his body, he was like, "I've got to save her."
Yeah, he felt where you were at
But
right away. Yeah.
God was in his mind.
Right.
You know, it wasn't like anything that could be even articulated. He said he didn't know what came over him, but literally, he grabs me, okay? He grabs me in a headlock. Like, he's like ferocious. Like, now he's like, I'm his child and I'm going to die. And he's trying to keep me from the truck that's coming quick. So he grabs me, puts me in a headlock, just drags me down the campus. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm screaming, I'm biting him, I'm scratching him. I mean, I'm just going full on. And I'm thinking he's going to send me to the foster home.
Yeah.
And I don't want to go to a foster home. Like,
Right.
that's the last thing in the world I want. And he puts me in this little module room, opens up the door and pushes me in, and it's an AA meeting. And it's called the Stop-In Center on campus.
Wow.
And he says to the lady, Jean, who was running it, he says, please, please help her. And he's like, his whole face and his eyes are watered, and he's like, help her. And it was just powerful. And,
Wow.
and I didn't know. And in that AA meeting, I kind of opened my eyes, and there's like people I know. There's people like I've gotten high with, you know.
So there were some young people in there.
Well, they were all young people.
Oh,
it was
was.
on campus.
Oh, wow.
It was all the kids from the high school who were recovering.
Right.
So at that point, it was like, and then my friend Dan said, you could stay with me, you know, for a couple nights, you know, I'll
Yeah.
just call my parents. And then I woke up on a Tuesday, you know, and I ended up going to a young people's AA meeting. And I've never been without a home or food or anything since that day.
Wow.
Yeah, and Coach White was the one.
Wow. So he throws you in this meeting. Who'd you meet in that meeting? You saw
All
you
my
saw some friends.
yeah, like not all of them, but a lot of them. People
Right.
that were real alcoholic addicts, you know, who got dirty like me, were
Right.
sitting in that meeting, and it was just shocking. And then there was like this young people's AA meeting on Tuesday night in Huntington Beach
Yeah.
at the Civic Center, and they just started taking me. And so, like, I didn't have a chance to understand anything, right?
Right.
Like, it was just like, wow, what? Like, okay. And it felt nice,
Right.
so I went with it.
Yeah.
And, you know, like Dan's family let me stay with them for a while, and then a couple of the other friends let me stay with them for a while. And then I'm sitting at the Costa Mesa Club one day, because that's where I would go all day.
Right.
That's back then. That was your treatment center.
You just hung out at the clubs, huh?
I was a Costa Mesa Alano Club
Yeah.
girl.
What year was that?
1986.
86.
1986. And I mean, I was there with the greats. Like, my best friends were over 60. Like that, you know, I was mentored by the most
Right.
amazing humans.
Yeah.
And they loved me like I was their child.
Yeah.
And I was sitting there one day, and I was shell shocked, right? Like, I wasn't even 30 days sober yet. And I'm just sitting there, and I don't really know anybody, but that's where everybody tells me to just sit. So the manager's like, you know, are you hungry? You know, and I just start crying because I don't know what I'm going to do.
Right.
Like, the reality of my mom's in a mental institution, my dad's dead, and I'm in AA. Like,
Right.
what the? And
At 15.
Yeah. And I didn't kill myself.
Yeah.
Like, what happened? Like,
Yeah.
what the hell am I going to do now?
Yeah.
Like, and still got problems.
Right.
And I start crying, and he says, and his name was Spiritual Dawn, and he
That
said,
was back when they all had like
everybody
names.
had a nickname.
Everybody had a name.
Everybody had a
Yeah.
nickname. And he said, he had a little lisp, and he was the cutest guy in the world, and he's an old man, and he's like, hey, Velvet, I'm going to tell you something. I want you to go into a bathroom. I want you to get on your knees. I want you to pray for a miracle. And then I want you to go sweep the parking lot for the cigarette butts. And I was like, what? Okay. Like,
Right.
what? Like, first I felt like, is this guy trying to scam me to get me to
Right.
go clean or
Right.
do his job, you know? Like, and that's my cynical
Yeah.
street thought. And I did it anyway. I went, I prayed for a miracle. I said, God, please help me. Like,
Yeah.
help me. I don't know.
Yeah.
And so then I went, swept the parking lot, and then all of a sudden this guy, Bill Crutcher, shows up. And he's like, hey, my name's Bill, and I heard that maybe you're looking for a place to stay. He says, I'm looking for somebody to, like, maybe vacuum once a week, you know, and we'll trade. And I was like, what? Like, and then I was like, oh my God, a miracle. Like, Don
Right.
was right, a miracle. Like,
Right.
I didn't know Don called him,
Right,
told him
right.
the situation,
Yeah.
Bill shows up.
Yeah.
You know, but that's the way people did for me in
Yeah.
AA.
That's cool.
They saved my life.
Yeah.
They gave me a life.
Yeah.
When it said, oh, well, we help people, they didn't think, it wasn't just like on their terms,
Yeah.
or like conveniently. I
Right.
was so inconvenient to so many people,
Mm-hmm.
and it didn't matter.
Yeah.
And that's how I was brought up.
Right. And then so you stayed with Don. Did you get a sponsor right away?
Well, I didn't stay with Don. Don was the manager. I stayed with Bill.
Bill.
Crutcher, yeah.
Oh, Bill's the one.
Crutcher,
Okay.
Yeah. I did not. I got like 28 jobs.
Right.
And I couldn't read, so every time it came to reading or writing or anything, I would back myself up out of the place
Right.
and go back to the Alano Club crying, feeling like a total failure.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what to do. And my best friend, Dave Regal, who in my mind is a hero, he's the one, he's my hero. He'll always be my hero. He was the manager of the Alano Club, and he said, I'm sobbing. I'm saying, I'm never going to be anybody. I don't know what's going to happen to me, Dave. I know I love AA, and AA loves me, and I haven't gone without anything, but pretty soon people are going to be tired of me.
Mm-hmm.
And I was scared. I was like, I had a like something in me that wanted to be successful. I didn't
Right.
want to be a nobody, you know,
Right.
in my mind. And he says, I'm so tired of you playing stupid. And I was like, what are you talking about? And he's like, you just play dumb.
Told
You-
it like it
he
was,
like,
right?
you play stupid. You act like you can't read or write. He's like, you just never were given the opportunity to have the right atmosphere.
Mm-hmm.
And so he goes, we're going to go tomorrow. We're going to go down to Department of Rehabilitation. And he set up this appointment. We went down there, and that's where they used to help alcoholic addicts that were newly sober.
Right.
They'd set you up with general relief, and they'd put you in school full time.
Right.
Well, what happened was my test scores weren't very good, so I wasn't even eligible to go to a class yet. I had to first learn how to read and write.
Right.
So they did a test on me, and they said I should be a factory worker.
Mm-hmm.
That's where my level of cognitive, and
Right.
I looked at Dave, and just tears are rolling down my face. And he grabs me by the shirt, and there's another guy, the main guy was a coach too.
Uh-huh.
So I'm
You're
always
running all
with
these football
coaches.
coaches,
I'm
right?
always with
Yeah.
football coaches. So I got Dave as a coach, and I got this guy as a coach.
Yeah.
Dave grabs my arm, and he's like, don't listen to that shit.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean anything. That's just some test that the suits have to do
Right.
to it's not real.
Right.
And because he said that and believed it so hard, I believed it.
Mm-hmm.
Had he not been there to look me in the eye and tell me that that was just false,
Right.
and he believed it, I don't know where I'd be today.
Yeah.
He had mad belief in me that came from God, came from Alcoholics Anonymous, comes from, you have to believe in people.
Mm-hmm.
We have to have faith in each other.
Right.
And his power, I clinged on to.
Right.
And I went to school with all the immigrants and learned how to read and write. By the time I was 6 months in, I had like a 7th grade education.
Nice.
And it was a totally different
Yeah.
experience because it wasn't in school. It was with just people that were same age as me or older. We're all trying, right? It's the American dream.
Yeah.
We're here. I'm like
Right.
a little immigrant that,
Right.
I need help.
Yeah.
And then I went and I got a cosmetology license, and it was all because Dave said, I'm so sick of you playing stupid.
It's wild how God puts those people in our lives at one moment, one time to say the right thing to us that just
Changes everything. Changes everything.
Right.
And his commitment to me.
yeah.
It wasn't just words.
You believed it.
I believed it, and he
Yeah.
had a commitment to me.
Yeah.
He loved me.
Yeah. It's funny we keep talking about football coaches and
I
I'm
know.
a football coach too, and
I know.
there's that saying, it's like players don't care what you know until they know you care, and
That's
that's
right.
how we are as addicts and alcoholics, and
So
that's
true.
what we feel when we walk in the rooms. Like, okay, I'm somewhere where people love me because I'm a mess, and because I'm an alcoholic. So.
Absolutely.
So you went to cosmetology school. What
Went to
happened after that?
Cosmetology school. I was a terrible hairdresser, but I finally got a certificate of some
Yeah.
sort, right?
Yeah.
I go down to Charlie Street. That's our indigent little
Right.
facility down
Yeah.
the street here for men, and to detox. and I would practice giving haircuts, right?
On the guy,
Yeah.
on the guys that are coming off the streets, shaking at
Yeah,
Charlie
yeah.
Street. Love
So
it.
I go down there, and these guys would get so pissed at me. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I tried really hard to be good,
Yeah.
but like I just didn't have the knack for
Yeah.
it. You know, I had these guys just jumping up out of their seats, so pissed at me. You know what I mean? I didn't get them pissed at me.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyway, so that was my it didn't last long.
So that didn't last long. Then what was next?
Well, I ended up finding the love of my life. I've been blessed in Alcoholics Anonymous. You know,
Yeah.
I found my first husband,
Yeah.
Wilbur.
Yeah, know Wilbur well.
Yeah, Wilbur.
Sweetest guy in the
Wilbur
world.
was the
Yeah.
best. And I met Wilbur, and we got married. We had 2 kids.
Yeah.
It was amazing. It was like, you know, I was a shitty hairdresser. He was the cable man.
Right.
And, you know, we had these 2 little kids, and we couldn't have been happier. We loved Alcoholics Anonymous.
Yeah.
Our lives were sober.
Yeah.
Life was good. And then it was a strange experience because I was on the board of directors of the Costa Mesa Club.
Right.
And that's where I first learned I had talents, because
Right.
when you're on the board at the Costa Mesa Club back in the day, you actually had to do stuff.
Right.
So I would throw parties, and they'd make thousands of dollars,
Mm-hmm.
and I'd do these Christmas events, and I would these kids would get presents, these little kids from these women's programs, that women and children. And anyway, I was like, wow, I have a talent. But it was
Yeah.
because they let me do it
Right.
that I got to know I had a talent. But it was a weird time. A lot of women were getting raped at the clubs and stuff, like not at the clubs, but men, oh, I'm going to help you.
Right.
Okay.
Predators in the
Yeah.
program. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to help you. I wouldn't even know that they weren't in the AA meetings. They were just
Yeah.
hanger-oners, you know?
Right.
And this was happening in Garden Grove Club, the Costa Mesa Club, like Santa Ana Club. Like, we're all kind of like, what are we going to do about this?
Mm-hmm.
And in 1993, or let's say 1992, this topic was coming up. And they would say, well, you know, women are really high maintenance, and there aren't that many of them, and, you know, and they tell stories that aren't true. So we don't really want to get involved in, like, housing them.
Right.
And I was kind of like, what? And this was
Yeah.
at the board of directors. And I was like, how is that even like a possibility that just came out of your mouth? Like, I mean, it was shocking
Exactly,
to me.
right?
Like, and I remember, and I'm literally a shitty hairdresser.
Right.
I'm not very good at anything really.
Yeah.
So, but I keep having this vision, and the vision is these women are safe. And this vision is that these women have this wonderful little coffee table that they sit at, and they get ready for work, and they're happy, and they have each other.
Yeah.
And they have each other in this experience of love that I had.
Right.
And I was just thinking constantly about this, and I couldn't get this out of my head. And so I would go into my prayer and meditation, and I would just say, well, I'm not sure how you think I'm supposed to do any of this, but like, if you want me to, I'll help, I'll get somebody to do it. So I went to my richest friend at the time that I had, and he was a painter. He was the richest guy I know.
Yeah.
And I said, I want to do this for women. I'll work for free, you know, just start it, and I'll work it.
Right.
And he's like, nah, I don't want anything to do with that. And then basically it was like, okay. So one day I was like, okay, God, I don't know why you keep bothering me with this, because I can't get anything done.
Right.
And an idea came that I should just call a stranger. So it was like a stranger who rented houses. So I was like, okay. So I call this guy. It's up the street from the Costa Mesa Club. And I'm like, I really want to help women, but I don't have any money.
Uh-huh.
Can you help me?
Yeah.
And he is like, he didn't hang up on me. And he
Okay.
said, come down and check out the place. Let's talk about it. And so I take my daughter, Taryn, who is
Yeah.
6 months old, on my hip, and we go down to this little place, and we're looking around, and I'm like, I don't have any money,
Yeah.
but these women need help.
Right.
They're suffering, and they need help. And nobody wants to help them. And I tell him about what they said at the New Costa Mesa Club.
Yeah.
And I tell him, and he's like, I don't even know if he owned the place. I think he
Yeah.
was just a manager of some sort,
Right.
you know? So he says, fill out the application, and then basically I'll get back to you. And I'm like, okay, all right, I'll fill out the application. So I fill out the application. Me and Taryn leave. We go home. He calls me about an hour later, and he's like, if you could come up with $800, that's all you need is $800. I'll waive the security deposit. It's just $800. And I'm like, oh, thanks, because like $20 is is
Right.
we don't even have an extra 20. Like
Yeah.
we barely make the rent. It's like,
Right.
so I'm disappointed. I'm sad. I'm like, okay, God, I did what you told me to do. I did everything. I sit down. My husband comes in, and I tell him, I tried again. God said this, and he never thought I was crazy. Like
Yeah.
he always knew I was supposed to help women.
Yeah.
He always said, you have a gift that nobody else has. You go straight to their soul. And because he had faith in me, I believed. And he comes home and he says, look, the guy offered me $800 today to buy our van. He says, I'm selling it, and you're starting. We're doing this.
Oh, wow.
So he sold the van. We sold our TVs, our VCRs. We sold everything of value and started that little safe harbor. And the reason we called it Safe Harbor was there's a part in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, or no, in the 12 and 12, in the third step, where it says, we find that every newcomer will find Alcoholics Anonymous a safe harbor.
Yeah.
And that's what Alcoholics Anonymous was for me.
Wow.
And I wanted to transfer
Right.
that safe harbor that I experienced.
Right.
So lucky to experience and make sure that any woman I ever came across had the
Yeah.
same experience.
Yeah.
And we started, and within 2 weeks it was full, and I had a
Yeah.
waiting list.
Yeah.
But I couldn't pay the bills because I didn't know what to charge.
Right.
So I had to learn
Because
everything.
back then, people
you know?
weren't billing insurance,
No,
treatment
no,
centers.
no,
There were
no.
sober living by the
No.
sea, and that was where all the
Yeah, no.
clients came from out of state that had
Yeah.
the money to pay for that.
Yeah, no, this was just
So-
cash, and I think I charged $60 a week for like
$60
5
a
years.
week.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I did exactly as God had me do.
Right.
And that treatment center served in a way that, like, I had so much suffering in my lifetime that I finally understood why. And it made so much sense
Right.
why I had the deep trauma, why I had that, relapse, why I had all
Right.
these things. And I could help these women from real experience
Right.
and actually coming up out of it and being a work in progress, willing to grow in public.
Yeah.
And I never came at people. I know I still don't come at anybody as I'm some hierarchy. It's just, me and
Yeah.
you right here, right now.
So that's 1993. You opened that place up, and then how many
I sold
women?
it
How many women were at
Oh, thousands.
I know, but at that particular house you started. That.
Oh, that
nobody
little
knew
house.
about treatment really then.
There was
except
no
for- Yeah,
treatment.
so you opened the house, and what was that like? What did you do? Like, what did you like? I want to know
Well,
because
the
there's
word-
so much mechanics to treatment now. Like, what was it
Yeah.
like back then?
Well,
What did
then
they do?
it was a totally different thing. It was that Velvet's doing this.
Right.
And so then anytime anybody knew, because I'm always been an active member of Alcoholics Anonymous.
Right.
And back in those days, that profession was very highly looked on because we were all doing the right thing.
Right.
Nobody was trying to hurt anyone. We were
Right.
there to help.
Yeah.
And that's how we did it.
There wasn't millions of dollars
There was
coming through
none
those
of that.
places
It
yet.
wasn't
Right.
happening. Yeah.
Yeah.
And as I grew into understanding that women were suffering greater sufferings than just what the 12 steps could help them with,
Right.
I went to great lengths to make sure I got the best and the appropriate, like smart services for them that I knew helped me overcome significant trauma,
Yeah.
sexual assault, all of the
Right.
things. Because what happened for me, even in Alcoholics Anonymous, was that I could not get past this shame. I didn't have words and I didn't have the direction. And this was like buried alive in me, this shame and this like dark self-hatred. And I had freedom. Believe me, I had way more freedom than I had as a little feral cat in the beginning of my journey, but I couldn't get past my own sabotage. So I had to go deep into some work.
Yeah.
And so what I did is I tried to immerse it into their experience.
Yeah.
And from experience of knowing what constantly held me back.
Yeah.
And a lot of women stayed sober and have
Right.
really, really incredible lives.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I know it wasn't me, it was a divine idea.
Yeah.
A divine idea. And then the business got real business-like for a lot of people.
Right.
And the people that you trusted
the middle of a podcast right now. Can you come back in like 30 minutes? Okay. I felt horrible. He handed me a card that said he was. We're gonna edit this out, right? So.
No, we're leaving it in.
Murphy, we're editing it out. He like said he's poor guy, like he's deaf, he can't hear. Can he have $2? And I'm like, yeah, poor guy. So okay, let's start back. Just winging it, Murphy. So
You might want to lock that door.
all right, we'll start over. Okay, so you grew up in no, I'm just kidding. Okay, so I want to know about Safe Harbor. You started that, right? And had no idea what you were doing in treatment. You knew
No
about
idea.
Alcoholics Anonymous.
Yes.
In 2 weeks, you have a house full of how many women?
Well, that little house was just 4 women,
Okay.
and it was just a 2-bedroom little house.
Okay.
But then at that point, it was like clearly I needed to have another house.
Right.
But I hadn't figured out the money thing
Right.
to like figure out how to get a next house.
Yeah.
So everything was like this, like, okay, well, you better figure this out. And so then I saved enough money to get the second house.
Right.
And then, that's just how it happened. And word of mouth because of what we were doing. And nobody just treated women,
Right.
except for New Directions. But New Directions was more of an insurance treatment center. It wasn't like, and you had to have quite a bit of money to get into New Directions. So this was a whole nother
Right.
like lifestyle
Yeah.
of working.
Because there was a men's one called the Blue House back then.
Not back then.
It
That
wasn't even
came
back
in the
then.
90s.
That was in the
That was
90s.
No, that was in the late 90s.
Late 90s,
Yeah,
okay.
almost beginning of 2000.
All right.
Yeah.
So women just started showing up. And then, so what did you
Well,
do to
the-
start? You just took them to meetings and.
Well,
Yeah.
we had 3 AA meetings a week at the place, and then they went to meetings all day, every day, and
Yeah.
and they had jobs, and
Right.
I wasn't trying to govern them. I was trying to create an atmosphere
Right.
where I had certain principles where women aren't very nice to each other. They're really mean to each other, to be honest with
Yeah.
you. So I taught that you have to stay in the love. Like that's the biggest rule here is besides to staying sober is you have to stay in the love. You cannot criticize or condemn your sister
Yeah.
so that you feel better about yourself.
Yeah.
We need to talk about what's bugging you
Right.
deeply, and then your sisters can help you through
Yeah.
it. And that concept was just not a thing. And
Yeah.
the women, because when we come from a place of alcoholism and drug addiction,
Right.
women are not your friends.
Right.
The men are your friends,
Right.
and they're not really your friends, but they're
Right.
the ones you can manipulate.
Right. Okay. So then that started growing.
It just
growing.
grew, yeah. It grew and grew and grew, and then as I continued, I realized that they weren't getting the help they needed. They were getting some people that was fine, but a lot of us women had a lot more stuff that
Right.
needed to be looked upon and addressed
Yeah.
to get a foundation.
Mental health, trauma.
Yeah, mostly it's
yeah.
that trauma.
Yeah.
That it's that trauma that we don't have words for.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up being blessed to go and do work with Tion Dayton, Dayton's world famous recovery for trauma. And the woman's totally changed my life. Like
Yeah.
she did stuff to me that till this
Right.
day I don't know. But I said to Tion, I can't go and look at these women with a comfort in me knowing that they'll never get where I am if they don't do this work.
Right.
You gotta help me.
Yeah.
And she trained all my therapists, and she created a curriculum just for my treatment center.
Okay.
Like, she
Yeah.
believed in me.
Right.
Somehow, by the grace of God, people believed in me.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know why, but
And
they did.
then this little girl that hustled and
My first
couldn't
career.
read and got sober at 15 with a
Yeah.
headlock from Coach White.
Yeah.
Now started this little treatment center that kind of really morphed into a pretty successful
Yeah. It was nationwide.
treatment center
Yeah.
that not only was financially successful,
Yeah.
but you've helped probably more women than anybody I know. So talk to me about that and what that was like.
Well, it's funny because I always tried really hard, and still to this day, try not to take any credit, because when you're blessed to serve in that realm and you get all this intuition and all this, like, every door opens for you, and you get to do this, right? You get to meet little girls that are sitting on a couch at a treatment center in Oregon, and you get to bring them home, and then
Right.
all of a sudden their lives just prosper.
Yeah.
Like, that's way bigger than a person.
Yeah.
So I've always just found so much, my heart feels so good when I see them. And there's, I see them on Facebook, I see them on Instagram, I see them all the time, and I see their lives, I see their children's lives, I see their parents' lives, and I know that we had a moment together,
Yeah.
a moment of clarity together, and I know that manifested into their lives, and that to me is like the greatest gift ever.
Yeah.
They may never even think of me again, ever again after that time.
Yeah.
And to me, knowing that I did something for God, that people did for me, it makes me feel good about myself.
It's like that chain reaction of love, and it's like I always think about when you and I talk. It's like I have a wife and 2 kids. That if that guy in the Costa, well, I didn't put this part in it until we just started talking, but that guy in the Costa Mesa Club hadn't have loved you,
Yep.
you wouldn't have gotten to where you got, which you went to Oregon 17 years ago and met my wife,
Yep.
who was really struggling at the time. Got her down here.
Yep.
I ended up meeting her at the Newport Club.
Yeah.
Here I am, 15 years happily married, and
Yeah.
2
Isn't that
kids,
powerful?
just because of that chain of
The moment.
God putting us in different places at different times. And you think about that, I mean, there's 2 lives that are on the planet because of that
Isn't that amazing?
moment you had with that guy in the Costa Mesa Club.
I know.
You
So
know?
many moments
Yeah.
of miraculous love.
Yeah,
And to me, that's the story.
yeah,
It's love.
yeah.
And it's selfless love. I didn't know I was going to be rich or I was going to any of those things.
Right.
Literally, I didn't know any of that. I just knew that I had something in me that was supposed to serve. The world didn't show up for me properly. Like, I didn't really have a place, so I had to create this place. The
Right.
universe created a place for me that I would be good at.
Yeah,
And I just stepped into it. But I had people like my first husband and Dave and people
Yeah.
that just saw things in me that I couldn't see.
yeah,
And I think that's so important for our journey in recovery is to see the higher good in people
right,
and just really believe it.
right,
When they tell you that they're stupid and they can't, you just say, I'm done listening to that
right.
shit.
Exactly.
That's the
Exactly.
power of recovery to me is like,
Exactly.
no, you're not hopeless.
Yeah.
We got this.
Yeah,
Come on, let's go.
Yeah.
Get in my car. We're going to a meeting.
yeah,
Simple.
yeah. So you sold Safe Harbor how many years ago?
2018.
2018. So right before the COVID
Yeah.
epidemic.
Yeah.
So what have you been up to since 18?
Well, I can go into that. I had
Yeah.
a relapse at 2000. I relapsed after my divorce.
Okay.
I relapsed and I just lost it.
What year was that?
I got separated in 2011. I think it was 2013.
Okay.
I always start off with pain pills.
Mm-hmm.
It's where I go. It's where my trauma goes too, because like
Yeah.
being like a little kid who was on phenobarbital to like, because I
Yeah.
was pain. It's like
Yeah.
goes hand in hand for me.
So you got sober in
1986.
86 and
I think it
stayed
was-
sober till 2000.
No, I got sober in 1986. I've had 2 relapses
Okay.
in 30 some years. First relapse was 1997, I think.
Okay.
And I got addicted to pain pills. But I was like totally addicted to pain pills. And I'll tell you a little story in the moment of that. So at that point, I didn't really think I relapsed. I thought legitimately, because this disease is cunning, baffling
Sure.
power. I thought, oh, I'm sick, right? I'm sick and I need these drugs. This is what I need. And as it went further and further, the blacker and blacker I got. And I'm sitting in my room, and my poor husband and the kids are out and I can hear them playing and laughing. And, and my son comes in, the room's real dark, and he starts crying, blue eyes, just crying. He goes, Mama, when you believed in God, you weren't sick. And when you stopped believing in God, you got sick, Mama. And I was like, you little bastard.
Yeah,
like, because I
gotcha.
knew in that moment I was so full of shit. And that I had totally just like turned my back on the miracle. And it was because, in a lot of ways, it was that unresolved trauma I hadn't worked with, to be honest. The shame and the sabotage. I didn't feel worthy of Safe Harbor. I didn't feel worthy to be this good person. I was a bad person in my mind. So I had to create that. And he, because of his pureness and his pure love, and him knowing how much I had worked my relationship to God, and him just being so clear in the lights off, lights on. God, no God. It was like, okay, all right, I hear you. And I got clean again and sober, and then I had another 14 years. Okay. So I think the first one was 13, the second one was 14. So the numbers I'm not exact sure, but that about those amount of times. And then my husband at the time relapsed. I didn't know he'd relapsed, and he kind of went adrift, and I think I was pretty codependent to him. I'd say I was not even really knowing it, but I'm pretty sure. I think I may have even worshipped him and didn't know it. And when that ended, I stayed sober for a couple of years, but at the end of it, I couldn't. Yeah. I just didn't have I didn't have the AA I needed. I wasn't connected. I had allowed myself to become separate because I worked in treatment, don't you know? Right. And I also, there were so many clients in AA and separating me from that in my mind, I couldn't be myself. So I separated myself, and I didn't have the support I needed. Yeah. And you can't stay sober on your own.
Yeah. So you started with pain pills, and how long were you out for? And what?
The first time, only 4 months.
What about the second time?
The second time, it must have been 2013 to 2015.
Okay, so 2
because I
good
got
years.
sober in 2015. Yeah, and it wasn't it was like off and on. It was like still in my mind managing, right? But not at all, but like trying to. And then I isolated, and I basically just lived in a dark house in Venice Beach for like 2 years. Yeah.
And then other people just ran the treatment center.
I didn't even go near it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then by the time I sobered up, it was like the whole world of treatment had changed.
Yeah.
And it was just too much out of my league, and I just didn't know how to do it. And I sold what I had and got out. And I needed to stay sober no matter what. And I needed to never put myself in a place where I couldn't be exactly where I was at.
So what was the event that got you sober and this last time?
You know, what's strange is it wasn't an event. It was like this weird experience because I had rented a house in Newport Beach. had a house in Venice I was living in, and I rented this house because my first husband ended up getting cancer. And so I thought, if I rent this house at the beach, it's a place where we could meet, the family could meet, and we could help him. And so I rented this house. And I didn't know it, but it was where all my AA friends surfed. It was right on Prospect.
Oh, where Ray and all those guys go every day, right?
So I'm looking outside the freaking window on a regular basis, and there's that joy, happy, joyous, and free, AA flowing, and I'm just like this tight little curmudgeon that's just high as could be and just pissed, right? And every day I'm just watching it, and I just know. And so I finally ended up going out there, and they're like, oh, hey, wow, so happy to see me, just love the shit out of me. And they're like, let's start an AA meeting here. Yeah. And so honestly, I intended that I'd probably die. Like I should just die a very painful, horrible life because I thought I needed to be punished in my mind, I was a bad person. Yeah. They didn't see it that way one more time. And we started to have the AA meeting there, and I remember just raising my hand and I got 2 days. And they were like, "Whoa, that's cool." You know what I mean? That's great. And that was it. And that was the beginning.
Came back home. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so what's been going on in your life now? You've sold it.
Oh my God, I sold it.
What's going on?
That took me a while to get used to, but I sold it. My first husband died. That was tragic, but that's the cancer and addiction. It's just not a good combo. Right. Any of you who are suffering, stay close to AA. So he ended up passing away, and then I was in Venice, and I met the most wonderful people in Alcoholics Anonymous, and it was interesting because I wasn't attached to Velvet Safe Harbor.
Right.
I was just velvet.
You were
Nobody
just
knew
velvet.
me.
Yeah.
Nobody knew me from a can of paint.
Yeah.
You know, and it was such a relief.
Yeah.
And I was a banana amongst the bunch one more
Yeah.
time. And I grew slowly into developing a feeling inside of myself that, okay, God, I'm forgiven. I don't need to hurt myself anymore. I'm not punished by my mistakes. You know, I'm not punished for my mistakes, but by my mistakes. Enough is enough.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it's like the Dave, I'm tired of you playing stupid. Let it go. And so slowly I allowed myself to express myself as me, not attached to any treatment center or
Mm-hmm.
the good opinion of others,
Yeah.
if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
And then, you know, met my husband. I got married
Yeah.
again. I love this man. He's incredible. Like, I thought for sure, you know, I had a great life. I had a
Yeah.
great marriage. I had it. I'm
Yeah.
never going to get another one. And I was
Right.
comfortable with that. Like, okay,
Yeah.
you know, wow, you know, I got the love of my life for a long time.
Yeah.
And this man has just blown me away. Like,
Yeah.
he just blows me away. It's incredible.
Yeah.
Like, shocking how much this man loves me, loves my family. We work so hard together. He's incredible. It's just so.
Yeah.
So don't give up, ladies.
Don't give up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or men.
Yeah.
Believe in love.
So life is good.
Life
Having
is
fun.
so good.
Yeah.
Yes, life is so
Okay,
good.
last question. What is your message to that woman or young woman out there that's struggling right now and doesn't know where to go, doesn't know where to turn?
You need
What
to
is your message
yeah.
to them?
Well, anything is possible. Anything is possible. You're not hopeless. Like that whole idea that you're done. You're never gonna get. This is, you know, nothing good is gonna happen to you. It's a lie. It's a terrible lie, and you just gotta raise your hand, make that phone call, get help, and say your prayers, you know, and you will be led to the proper people in the proper place and the proper group, you know. But don't give up. There's like, all is good. Like, there's still so much good, and you just have to believe it. And I was in everybody else's mind except for Alcoholics Anonymous, just really like, forget her. She's not gonna go anywhere. She's done. She does nothing good. And my life is profoundly good. So it's not true. Just don't believe the lie. Come to Alcoholics Anonymous. Be with us. Get help.
Love it. All right. Well, thanks for coming on. Love you.
Love
All right.
you.
All right.
Thank you.